Hello and welcome. Let's pause together for a moment and take a breath before we begin. Today, we're stepping into a conversation that is not about perfection or certainty or winning every battle. It's about what it means to live fully, to stand in the arena of life, exposed and trembling, yet willing to show up anyway. At the center of Brené Brown's Daring Greatly lies one question that echoes in the heart of every human being. What happens when we choose courage over comfort and vulnerability over armor? If you find this summary helpful, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Book Snap, and comment below the title of the book you'd like us to summarize next. We'll make it happen soon. Now let's enter the story. Imagine standing in a spotlight, not on a stage with applause, but in the quiet, unrelenting glare of your own life. Your relationships, your work, your hopes, your flaws, all laid bare. Most of us spend years trying to dim that light, pulling the curtain shut, layering ourselves with defenses. We try to manage how others see us, or hide pieces of ourselves so the world won't judge too harshly. Vulnerability feels dangerous. It feels like exposure without guarantee. And yet, as Brené Brown reveals, this space of exposure is the birthplace of everything that gives life meaning: love, belonging, joy, creativity, and courage. She begins with an idea that sounds almost contradictory, that to live bravely, to live greatly, we must be willing to embrace the very thing we've been taught to avoid: vulnerability. Vulnerability is not weakness. It's risk. It's emotional exposure. It's the trembling voice when we say, "I love you," first, or the leap of faith when we launch a project that might fail, or the quiet decision to tell the truth when silence would be safer. Brown draws inspiration from Theodore Roosevelt's famous speech, "The Man in the Arena." In it, Roosevelt honors not the critics, not the ones pointing fingers from the sidelines, but the one who steps into the arena, face marred with dust and sweat and blood, daring greatly. Success and failure both pale in comparison to the act of showing up with courage. Brown lifts this metaphor into our everyday lives. She asks, what arenas are you avoiding? Where are you refusing to step in, out of fear of judgment or shame? Think about it. How often do we hold back our ideas in a meeting, worried that they'll sound foolish? How often do we stop ourselves from reaching out to someone, afraid of rejection? How many times do we swallow our pain or our dreams because voicing them feels too risky? These small acts of self-protection seem safe in the moment, but they add up to something devastating: a life lived on the edges, never fully claimed. But daring greatly is not reckless. It's not about throwing yourself into chaos without care. It's about conscious courage, showing up with your whole heart, knowing the risks, and accepting that failure, disappointment, and discomfort are part of the path. To dare greatly is to admit, I cannot control how this turns out, but I will step forward anyway. Brown's work is rooted in years of research, but it pulses with something more human: her own confessions, her own struggles with perfectionism, shame, and fear. She admits that vulnerability terrifies her too, and in that honesty, she models the very thing she teaches. She shows us that vulnerability is not a concept to master, but a practice to live. Consider the paradox here. Every meaningful human experience demands vulnerability. Love means opening yourself to the possibility of loss. Creativity means offering work that may be rejected. Leadership means standing in uncertainty, guiding others without guarantees. Even joy, Brown argues, requires vulnerability, because to fully embrace joy is to recognize its fragility, that it could be taken from us at any moment. Vulnerability is the thread woven through all of it. So the journey of daring greatly begins with this reframe. What if we've had it backwards all along? What if strength is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to walk with it? What if real courage is not in hiding our imperfections, but in laying them bare and saying, "This is me"? Picture a child learning to walk. They stumble, they fall, they laugh, they cry, yet they keep moving forward. There is no shame in their unsteadiness, only determination. That is daring greatly. Somewhere along the way, as adults, we learn to fear the stumble. We begin to armor ourselves, trying to present polished versions of who we are. But Brown invites us to return to that childlike truth. That growth requires falling, and love requires risk, and life itself demands exposure. As this journey unfolds, Brown will show us the many shapes of armor we carry, the voices of shame that silence us, and the pathways back to wholehearted living. But it begins here, in the arena, where we make a choice. To live small, hidden behind the walls of safety, or to step forward, trembling, imperfect, but alive. The courage to begin is not grand. It is not glamorous. It is simply the decision to show up as we are, wherever we are, and say, I am here. I am willing. I will dare greatly. We carry armor we don't even realize we've built. Layer by layer, piece by piece, we have covered ourselves in defenses meant to keep pain out, but that also keep life at a distance. Brené Brown calls this armor the habits and masks we wear when shame and fear whisper that we are not enough. It might look like perfectionism, where every flaw feels like a crack others will exploit. It might look like cynicism, where dismissing hope seems safer than risking disappointment. Or it might look like numbing, scrolling endlessly, drinking, working too much, anything that helps us avoid the sting of vulnerability. This armor promises safety, but what it delivers is isolation. When we perfect, we present a polished shell, but hide the messy human truth that makes real connection possible. When we numb, we mute the pain but also dim joy, creativity, and love. And when we pretend not to care, we starve ourselves of belonging, because belonging requires being seen. Think of a knight stepping onto a battlefield in armor so heavy he can barely move. The steel protects him, yes, but it also traps him, suffocates him, keeps him from ever fully engaging. That's what our emotional armor does. It shields us from rejection, but also from intimacy. It protects us from failure, but also from learning and growth. The price of safety is aliveness. Shame is the force that drives us to armor up. It whispers that we are unworthy, that exposure will lead to rejection. It says, if they really knew you, they wouldn't love you. And so, we cover ourselves. But Brown's research shows that shame cannot survive being spoken aloud and met with empathy. The more we armor, the stronger shame grows. The more we shed, the weaker it becomes. Perfectionism, one of the heaviest armors, is often mistaken for striving for excellence. But excellence grows from curiosity and passion, while perfectionism grows from fear of judgment. Excellence says, I want to improve. Perfectionism says, if I'm flawless, I'll finally be accepted. And no matter how hard we try, perfection never delivers that acceptance. It only deepens the hunger. Another form of armor is foreboding joy. It sounds strange, but Brown describes how many of us kill joy before it fully blossoms. We tell ourselves, don't get too happy. Something bad is bound to happen. We rehearse tragedy in our minds, trying to preempt pain. But in doing so, we rob ourselves of the sweetness of the present. Vulnerability means letting joy wash over us, knowing its impermanence, and choosing to feel it anyway. Then there is numbing. When life feels overwhelming, numbing whispers, relief. But Brown warns, we cannot selectively numb emotions. When we numb grief, fear, and shame, we also numb love, creativity, and gratitude. The price is a flat, muted existence. Vulnerability, in contrast, asks us to feel fully, to face discomfort head-on, and to grow stronger through it. Why does shedding armor feel so terrifying? Because armor has been rewarded in our culture. Perfection is praised. Cynicism passes for wisdom. Overwork earns applause. But Brown invites us to question the cost of these rewards. Are they worth the distance they create between who we are and who we long to be? Imagine standing before someone you love and slowly unclasping the plates of armor. The breastplate of perfection falls away. The shield of numbing lowers. The helmet of cynicism is lifted. What remains is not weakness, but humanity. It is this humanity, flawed, messy, unguarded, that allows true connection. The paradox is clear. The armor we thought protected us has been our prison. To dare greatly, we must lay it down. Vulnerability does not mean reckless exposure. It means showing up authentically, without hiding behind the shields of shame. It means risking being seen and trusting that our worth does not depend on perfection, applause, or control. In the end, the choice is stark. Stay hidden, weighed down by armor, or step into life unguarded, risking pain but opening to joy, love, and belonging. The armor we wear has kept us safe, but it has also kept us small. Daring greatly begins when we set it aside. We live in a culture that worships invulnerability. From the time we are young, we are told to be strong, not to cry, not to let them see you sweat. We celebrate the stoic, the unbreakable, the flawless hero who stands untouched by fear or doubt. But Brené Brown dismantles this myth with precision. Invulnerability is not strength, it is disconnection. It is the refusal to engage with the very experiences that make us human. Think about the subtle ways this myth is reinforced. In workplaces, leaders who admit uncertainty are seen as weak. In families, children are told to toughen up when they show pain. In relationships, admitting need is treated as clinginess. Everywhere, we absorb the message. Don't let them see your cracks. But what happens to a vessel with no cracks? No light gets in, no air flows through, no life can truly touch it. The truth Brown uncovers is this: vulnerability is not the opposite of strength, it is the measure of it. Strength is not about never falling, it is about rising after we fall. Real courage is not about being bulletproof, but about being willing to stand open to risk, knowing wounds may come. The myth of invulnerability robs us of this courage by convincing us that our worth lies in performance, perfection, or control. Consider the image of a mountain climber clinging to a sheer cliff face. From the outside, she looks invincible, all muscle and focus. But if you could step into her heart, you'd feel the pounding fear, the trembling hope, the trust in the rope that might fail. Her achievement doesn't come from being free of fear. It comes from feeling the fear and climbing anyway. That is vulnerability in action, and that is the true definition of strength. Our culture's obsession with invulnerability also creates a collective exhaustion. People strive endlessly to look fine, sound fine, and live fine, even when they are crumbling inside. Brown calls this the hustle for worthiness, the exhausting attempt to prove that we are enough by never showing weakness. But this hustle never ends. No matter how flawless the performance, the inner whisper remains. If they really saw me, they would turn away. What if we let go of this performance? What if we dared to believe that our cracks are not flaws to hide, but entry points for connection? Brown's research shows that people who live most wholeheartedly are not those who appear invulnerable, but those who embrace imperfection and still show up. They say, "I am imperfect and afraid, but that does not diminish my worth." The myth of invulnerability also distorts leadership. We are taught that leaders must project certainty and control. But in truth, the most effective leaders are those who admit what they don't know, who invite collaboration, who risk saying, "I need help." Vulnerability in leadership breeds trust, because people sense authenticity. Invulnerability breeds fear, Because people sense pretense. Brown reminds us that we cannot selectively cut off vulnerability. If we wall ourselves against fear, we also wall ourselves against joy. If we deny uncertainty, we also shut out wonder. The cost of trying to appear invulnerable is a life lived flat, safe, but deeply unsatisfying. So the invitation is clear: to reclaim our strength by dismantling the myth, to understand that tears are not weakness, that admitting fear is not defeat, and that showing need is not failure. Our humanity is not something to hide, it is something to honor. Imagine a world where children are told, "Your feelings matter. It's okay to be scared. It's brave to ask for help." Imagine workplaces where leaders say, "I don't have all the answers, but I trust this team to figure it out." Imagine relationships where partners say, "I need you," without fear of judgment. This is the world vulnerability makes possible. The myth of invulnerability has shaped us for generations. But with awareness, we can choose a different path. We can choose to equate strength not with the absence of fear, but with the courage to face it. We can let go of the armor of perfection, stop hustling for worthiness, and remember that our cracks are proof that we are alive. To dare greatly, we must first let the myth die. Only then can we live as we truly are: human, imperfect, vulnerable, and deeply strong. Picture the arena. The sand is hot beneath your feet, the walls high, the crowd watching. You are not a gladiator with sword and shield, but a person stepping into the arena of your own life. This arena might be a stage where you perform, a meeting where you share an idea, a conversation where you confess your truth, or a relationship where you risk saying, "I love you." The details change, but the feeling is the same. Heart pounding, palms sweating, 1,000 fears screaming in your head. This is what Brené Brown means when she talks about entering the arena. It's not metaphor for the privileged few, it's a reality for every one of us. Each day we face the choice to stay hidden in the shadows or to step into the light where judgment and failure are possible. To enter the arena is to risk being seen, to risk stumbling, to risk criticism. But it is also the only place where growth, connection, and greatness are born. Think of the projects you've dreamed about but never launched, the conversations you've rehearsed but never had, the art you wanted to make but kept tucked in a drawer. Each of these is an arena waiting for you. The spectators, the critics, are always there. They will question, dismiss, and sometimes laugh. But Brown reminds us that the critics are not the point. The point is that you had the courage to step in. Roosevelt's words echo here. It is not the critic who counts. The credit belongs to the one who dares, who tries, who fails and rises again. In your life, that is you, if you are willing. The arena is not a place of guarantees. It is a place of exposure, but it is also the only place where you can live fully awake. Stepping into the arena also means embracing uncertainty. You cannot control how others will respond. You cannot guarantee success. You may face ridicule, rejection, or silence. But what Brown shows us is that failure inside the arena carries honor. It is proof that you had the courage to try. What carries no honor is standing outside, safe and untouched, while life passes by. She tells stories of people who risked vulnerability: a teacher who dared to change her classroom by admitting mistakes, a CEO who invited feedback knowing it might sting, parents who admitted their fears to their children rather than pretending to be flawless. Each of them walked into the arena of their context, and each discovered that courage builds trust, while armor builds distance. Ask yourself, what arena am I avoiding right now? Is it telling someone the truth about how I feel? Is it sharing my creative work? Is it admitting that I need help? Often, the very arena we avoid holds the key to the connection or growth we crave. It is tempting to wait until we feel ready. But Brown insists, there is no ready. There is only now. Courage does not come before action. It is forged in action. You step into the arena first, and only then discover the resilience within you. The fear of entering the arena is universal, but so is the longing for meaning, and meaning is not found in comfort, but in courage. When you look back at your life, the moments that define you will not be the ones when you stayed safe. They will be the ones when you walked in trembling, uncertain, and dared anyway. Entering the arena is not about winning, it is about showing up. It is about being willing to be seen, to risk, to fail, and to rise again. The arena is where you become who you are meant to be. So the call stands before you. Will you remain a spectator, or will you step into the dust and light, daring greatly with your one precious life? Shame is the silent shadow that follows us into every arena. It is not the sharp sting of guilt. Guilt says, "I did something bad." Shame whispers something far more corrosive. "I am bad. I am not enough." Brené Brown calls shame the master emotion, the one that convinces us to stay small, to stay quiet, to never risk being seen. Shame shows up in countless ways. It's the voice that says, "You're too much," when you speak up, or "You're not enough," when you stay silent. It's the flush of heat in your face when you make a mistake, the urge to hide when someone points out a flaw. Shame thrives in secrecy and silence, convincing us that we are alone in our unworthiness. But here's the truth Brown reveals. Everyone experiences shame. It is universal. The difference is not whether we feel it, but whether we let it dictate our lives. Some people armor up against shame with perfectionism or withdrawal. Others lash out in anger or criticism, trying to push the spotlight away from themselves. But in every case, shame isolates us. It keeps us from reaching out for the very empathy that could dissolve it. The trap of shame is that it feeds itself. The more we hide, the more shame convinces us that we must hide. Brown's research shows that the only way to break the cycle is to bring shame into the light. When we speak our shame to someone who responds with empathy, its grip loosens. Empathy is the antidote. Think of a time you confessed a fear or mistake to a trusted friend, and instead of judgment, they said, "Me too." In that moment, the isolation of shame cracked open. You realized you were not alone. That is what empathy does. It turns the spotlight of shame into a lantern of connection. Shame also thrives on cultural scripts. For women, shame often centers on appearance and motherhood. Be thin, be beautiful, be nurturing, be perfect. For men, shame often attacks vulnerability itself. Never be weak, never fail, always be in control. These scripts are impossible to fulfill, but shame convinces us to keep trying, punishing ourselves when we inevitably fall short. Brown urges us to recognize these scripts and name them for what they are. Traps. They are not truths about our worth, but cultural lies that profit from our insecurity. To resist them, we must practice self-compassion and seek relationships where empathy flows freely. One of the most powerful tools against shame is what Brown calls shame resilience. It means recognizing the voice of shame when it speaks, reality checking its message, reaching out for empathy, and reminding ourselves of our worth. Shame resilience does not mean never feeling shame. It means refusing to let it define us. Imagine carrying a heavy backpack filled with rocks. Every mistake, every judgment, every cultural expectation adds another stone. Shame tells you this backpack is yours to carry forever. But when you speak it aloud, "I feel like I'm not enough. I feel like I failed," and someone answers with empathy, it's as if a stone is lifted out. Slowly, the weight lessens. Without addressing shame, daring greatly is impossible. Shame is the voice that will always tell you to stay on the sidelines, to stay quiet, to never risk. But with empathy, with connection, with resilience, shame loses its power. The arena becomes a place not of humiliation, but of courage. Brown reminds us the most dangerous words in shame's vocabulary are, "You are alone." The most powerful words in ours are, "Me too." Every time we choose empathy over judgment, we help someone else step free of the shame trap. And every time we accept empathy ourselves, we loosen shame's hold on our own lives. To live fully, we must expect shame to appear, but we do not have to obey it. We can name it, reach out, and answer its whisper of not enough with the truth. I am imperfect, I am vulnerable, and I am still worthy of love and belonging. Parenting is one of the most vulnerable arenas of all. There is no script, no perfect formula, no guarantee that love and effort will shield a child from pain. Brené Brown admits this openly. Every parent lives with the ache of uncertainty. Yet culture tells us to aim for perfection, to raise flawless children, to present polished families. And so shame and fear creep in, whispering that if our children stumble, it means we have failed. But parenting, Brown insists, is not about perfection. It is about modeling. Children do not need flawless parents. They need authentic ones. They learn how to live, not from the masks we wear, but from the courage we show in our own vulnerability. When we apologize after losing our temper, when we admit we don't have all the answers, when we show them how to rise after falling, we are teaching resilience. Think of the difference between a parent who says, "Don't ever cry, be strong," and one who kneels down and says, "It's okay to cry. I get scared too sometimes." The first teaches suppression, the second teaches courage. One builds armor, the other builds connection. Brown explains that shame in parenting often comes from comparison. We measure ourselves against other families, against cultural ideals, against impossible standards. Social media amplifies this, showing only highlight reels of perfect vacations, immaculate homes, smiling children. We look at our messy realities and believe we are failing. But the truth is, imperfection is universal. The mess is where the real parenting happens. Parenting with vulnerability means letting children see us as real people. It means teaching them that worth is not earned through perfection, but is inherent. It means showing them that mistakes are not disasters, but opportunities for growth. When children see us living this way, they internalize it. They learn shame resilience by watching us practice it. One of Brown's most striking ideas is that we cannot give our children what we do not practice ourselves. If we want them to feel worthy, we must live as though we are worthy. If we want them to risk vulnerability, we must risk it first. If we want them to practice empathy, we must offer it, to them and to ourselves. Parenting is less about what we say and more about who we are. Imagine a child coming home after failing a test. Shame tells the parent to scold, "Why didn't you study harder? You're letting me down." Vulnerability tells the parent to connect. "I know it hurts to fail. I've failed too. Let's talk about what we can do differently next time." One response deepens shame. The other builds resilience. Brown also highlights the courage it takes to let our children struggle. Protecting them from every discomfort might feel like love, but it robs them of resilience. Vulnerable parenting means standing beside them as they face difficulties, not sweeping those difficulties away. It means letting them feel fear, frustration, and even failure, while reminding them they are never alone. At its heart, parenting with vulnerability is about wholeheartedness. It is not about raising perfect children, but about raising children who know they are loved, even when they are imperfect. It is about creating a family culture where feelings are acknowledged, mistakes are forgiven, and courage is celebrated. Every parent carries doubt. Every parent wonders if they are enough. But Brown's message is liberating. The measure of parenting is not in producing flawless outcomes. It is in daring greatly within the messy, uncertain, beautiful process of raising another human being. It is in showing up, imperfect but present, and teaching our children to do the same. In the end, the most powerful gift we can give our children is not a shield from pain, but a model of courage in facing it. When we live authentically, we invite them to do the same. When we love them as they are, we teach them to believe they are enough. Parenting becomes not a performance, but a relationship of shared humanity. Approx word count 185. Word count 185. Word count 185. Word count 185. Love is the greatest risk of all. To love is to hand another person the power to hurt you, and to do it willingly. Brené Brown describes love as the ultimate act of vulnerability. It is standing before someone with your heart uncovered, saying, "Here I am, flaws and all. Will you hold me?" And knowing they could walk away. We often talk about love as though it is safe, inevitable, or easy. But Brown reminds us, real love is never guaranteed. Every "I love you" carries the possibility of rejection. Every deep bond carries the certainty of loss, because one day time or circumstance will separate us. Yet we love anyway. That is the daring part. Choosing love not because it is safe, but because it makes life worth living. Think of the quiet courage it takes to be the first to say, "I care about you," to admit, "I miss you," or to whisper, "I need you." These are not small acts. They are leaps into the unknown. Love demands exposure. Love says, "I cannot control how you respond, but I will reveal myself anyway." Brown points out that shame often poisons love. It tells us we are unworthy of it, that if our partners or friends really knew us, they would turn away. So we hide pieces of ourselves, presenting only the polished parts. But this false self cannot sustain intimacy. Real intimacy requires being fully seen, the good, the bad, the fragile. Without vulnerability, there is no true love, only performance. She also emphasizes that love requires boundaries. Vulnerability is not about spilling everything to anyone who asks. It is about discerning who has earned the right to hear our story. Trust builds slowly, through consistent care and respect. When trust is present, vulnerability deepens love. Without trust, vulnerability becomes exploitation. Consider a long marriage or a decades-long friendship. These bonds endure not because the people never hurt each other, but because they learn to repair, to admit when they are wrong, to forgive, to keep choosing each other even when it is hard. Every repair requires vulnerability. One person saying, "I'm sorry, I was wrong," and the other saying, "I forgive you." Without that courage, relationships crumble under the weight of pride and silence. Brown also reminds us of joy's fragile link to love. When we love deeply, we live with the fear of losing. Parents know this intimately. Holding a sleeping child, they sometimes imagine tragedy, rehearsing grief in their minds. It is a way of trying to protect themselves from the pain of loss. But foreboding joy robs the present. Vulnerability means choosing to feel joy fully, even with the risk of heartbreak. It means whispering gratitude instead of rehearsing disaster. Love as risk extends beyond romance. It lives in friendship, in family, in community. Every time we reach out to connect, we risk rejection. Every time we offer compassion, we risk indifference. But without that risk, we withhold the very gifts that make life meaningful. Imagine walking through life behind a wall, safe from hurt, but also untouched by closeness. That is the cost of avoiding vulnerability in love. Now imagine stepping through the gate, arms open, heart exposed. You may get wounded, yes, but you will also taste the sweetness of belonging, of being known and cherished as you are. To love is to accept uncertainty. To love is to invite joy and grief in equal measure. To love is to dare greatly. And though it asks everything of us, it gives back the only thing we truly crave: connection. In the end, love is not for the faint-hearted. It is for those who are willing to risk, for those who are willing to walk into the arena with trembling hands and open hearts, for those who understand that vulnerability is not a weakness in love, but the very proof that it is real. Work is one of the most powerful arenas where vulnerability, or the lack of it, shapes lives. Most of us spend the majority of our waking hours in workplaces, surrounded by colleagues, managers, and teams. And yet, in many offices, vulnerability is treated as weakness. Leaders believe they must have all the answers. Employees fear that admitting uncertainty will mark them as incompetent. Creativity is stifled by the demand for flawless execution. Brené Brown argues that this culture of invulnerability kills trust, innovation, and human connection at work. Think of a leader who never admits mistakes. They project confidence, but beneath the surface, their team walks on eggshells. No one dares to challenge ideas because mistakes are punished. Over time, creativity dries up, and fear takes root. Compare that to a leader who says, "I don't have all the answers, but let's figure this out together." That admission of vulnerability is not weakness. It is an invitation to collaboration. It signals safety. It gives others permission to speak up, to risk sharing ideas, to fail and learn. Brown points out that vulnerability at work is the birthplace of innovation. Every new idea carries risk of rejection, of wasted effort, of criticism. If failure is punished, no one dares to innovate. But in organizations where vulnerability is valued, people take creative leaps. They brainstorm freely, experiment boldly, and support one another through setbacks. The result is not chaos, but progress. She also highlights the connection between vulnerability and trust. Trust is built not when leaders pretend to be infallible, but when they show consistency, honesty, and openness. A manager who admits, "I made the wrong call on that project," may feel exposed. But to the team, it signals integrity. It tells them they don't have to hide mistakes either. Trust deepens, and with it, performance improves. Workplace vulnerability also reshapes how teams handle conflict. In many offices, disagreements fester because no one wants to seem difficult. People nod in meetings, then complain privately. But vulnerable teams practice honest dialogue. They say, "I see this differently. Can we talk it through?" This requires courage. It risks discomfort, but it prevents resentment and strengthens relationships. Consider how vulnerability transforms feedback. Too often, feedback is avoided or delivered harshly. But Brown emphasizes that feedback rooted in vulnerability is both honest and compassionate. It means saying, "Here's where I think we can improve, and I want us to succeed together." It risks hurt feelings, but it also builds growth. Without vulnerability, feedback becomes either destructive or absent, both of which harm organizations. Brown warns against confusing vulnerability with oversharing. At work, vulnerability is not about exposing every fear or personal struggle. It is about authenticity, showing up as a real human being rather than a polished facade. It is about creating space where people feel safe to bring their whole selves, without fear of ridicule or dismissal. One striking example comes from leaders who ask for input before making a decision. It takes humility to admit you don't have all the answers. It takes courage to risk hearing criticism. But this practice turns hierarchy into collaboration, and it gives employees a sense of ownership. Vulnerability, in this way, becomes a catalyst for engagement. Workplace cultures built on fear may achieve short-term results, but they exhaust people. They demand masks. They kill belonging. By contrast, cultures that embrace vulnerability create loyalty and energy. People stay where they feel seen and valued. They thrive where failure is not the end, but part of learning. Ultimately, Brown argues, Vulnerability in the workplace is not a soft skill. It is a core leadership skill. It determines whether organizations grow or stagnate, whether teams innovate or retreat, whether people give their best or simply survive. So, ask yourself, what arena of your work are you avoiding? Is it speaking up in a meeting, asking for help, admitting a mistake, or pitching a bold idea? Each is an invitation to vulnerability. Each is a chance to build trust, spark creativity, and strengthen connection. To dare greatly at work is to trade the illusion of control for the reality of collaboration. It is to risk criticism for the chance at innovation. It is to lead not with armor, but with authenticity. And in doing so, we create not just more productive workplaces, but more human ones. Scarcity is the quiet hum beneath much of our daily lives. It's the feeling that there is never enough. Not enough time, not enough success, not enough love, not enough of me. Brené Brown calls this the scarcity mindset, and she shows how it feeds shame and fear while draining joy. It convinces us that life is a competition, that if someone else has more, we must have less, and that we are always behind. Think of the way scarcity shows up in conversations. I didn't get enough sleep. I don't have enough hours. I don't earn enough. I don't look good enough. These phrases become the background music of our culture. Scarcity thrives because comparison is constant. Social media intensifies it. Everyone else looks happier, richer, more successful. The whisper grows. You are falling short. Scarcity doesn't just affect individuals. It infects workplaces, where teams hoard information and guard resources. It spreads in families, where love is measured and children compete for approval. It shapes communities, turning neighbors into rivals. Scarcity erodes trust because it teaches us that life is a zero-sum game. Brown contrasts scarcity with what she calls wholeheartedness. The path out of scarcity is not more striving, but more gratitude. Gratitude interrupts the cycle of never enough by focusing on what already is. When we pause to notice small blessings, a shared laugh, a warm meal, a safe home, we begin to shift from lack to abundance. Gratitude does not eliminate struggle, but it reframes it. Instead of obsessing over what is missing, we recognize what is present. Another antidote to scarcity is vulnerability. Scarcity says, don't let anyone see your weaknesses, or they'll use them against you. Vulnerability says, show up as you are, and you'll discover you are not alone. When we admit our fears, we invite empathy. When we reveal our struggles, we open the door to connection. Scarcity thrives in isolation. Vulnerability thrives in community. Consider the difference between entering a room with the mindset of scarcity versus abundance. In scarcity, you look around and think, everyone here is smarter, more talented, better than me. You shrink, you compete, you perform. In abundance, you enter and think, I belong here. I have something to contribute, and I can learn from others too. The room hasn't changed, only your mindset has. And that shift changes everything. Scarcity also distorts our relationship with joy. When we live in never enough, joy feels dangerous. We cut it short with thoughts like, don't get too happy. It won't last. This is foreboding joy, the refusal to embrace good moments because we fear their loss. Brown argues that gratitude is again the key. When joy rises, instead of rehearsing tragedy, we can whisper, I am grateful. Gratitude anchors us in the present, allowing joy to fully bloom. Scarcity convinces us that self-worth must be earned through endless achievement. But wholehearted living insists that worth is inherent. You are not worthy because you achieved enough or proved enough. You are worthy simply because you are human. This shift is radical in a world driven by scarcity. It means you can rest without guilt. It means you can celebrate others without feeling diminished. It means you can say, I am enough, and mean it. Imagine a family dinner where every person is competing to be heard, to be right, to be impressive. That is scarcity at the table. Now imagine a dinner where each voice matters, where gratitude is spoken aloud, where imperfections are not hidden but embraced. That is abundance. The difference is not in the food but in the spirit. Scarcity will always whisper in our ears. The culture of never enough is deeply entrenched. But we can choose differently. We can pause, breathe, and notice what is already good. We can replace comparison with compassion. We can trade fear for vulnerability and striving for gratitude. In the end, the scarcity mindset offers only exhaustion. But gratitude and vulnerability offer connection, joy, and peace. To dare greatly is to refuse the lie of never enough, and to live instead from the truth of I am enough. Wholehearted living is Brené Brown's vision for a life guided not by fear or scarcity, but by courage, compassion, and connection. It is not about achieving perfection or finally getting everything right. It is about embracing imperfection and still choosing to show up fully. Wholeheartedness is a posture of the soul, a way of moving through the world that says, I am enough as I am, right now. Brown describes wholehearted living as cultivating 3 core practices: self-compassion, resilience, and joy. Self-compassion means speaking to ourselves with the same kindness we offer to a loved one. So often, we are our own harshest critics. We berate ourselves for mistakes, call ourselves names, demand more and more. Wholehearted living begins when we change that inner voice. When we stumble, we say, it's okay. Everyone stumbles. I am still worthy. Resilience is the ability to rise again after falling. Wholehearted people do not avoid failure. They expect it. They trust that failure is part of the process of growth. What makes them different is their willingness to get back up, to try again, to keep moving. Resilience is forged through vulnerability, by admitting the fall, reaching for support, and daring to stand again. And joy is not a luxury, but a discipline. Brown explains that joy requires vulnerability, because to feel joy is to recognize its fragility. Many of us cut joy short with fear. What if it doesn't last? What if something bad happens? But wholehearted people choose to lean in. They let joy wash over them, even when it feels risky. And the way they sustain this joy is through gratitude. Gratitude grounds joy in the present moment, transforming it from a fleeting feeling into a daily practice. Wholehearted living also means setting boundaries. Vulnerability does not mean saying yes to everything or allowing others to walk over us. It means being clear about what we need and what we can give. Wholehearted people understand that saying no can be an act of courage and self-respect. Boundaries protect the space where joy and compassion can flourish. Consider a life shaped by wholeheartedness. You wake up, and instead of immediately scrolling through comparisons, you take a breath and name 3 things you are grateful for. You go to work, and instead of hiding mistakes, you admit them and ask for help. You return home, and instead of numbing with distraction, you choose presence, a conversation, a walk, a laugh. These are small acts, but together they weave a life of depth and authenticity. Brown stresses that wholeheartedness is not a destination. It is not something you achieve once and for all. It is a daily practice, a way of choosing vulnerability over armor, gratitude over scarcity, compassion over shame. Some days it feels natural. Other days, it feels impossible. But each choice strengthens the muscle of courage. The beauty of wholehearted living is that it transforms not only our inner lives, but our relationships. When we live wholeheartedly, we invite others to do the same. Our authenticity gives them permission to shed their armor. Our self-compassion models kindness they can extend to themselves. Our joy becomes contagious. Wholeheartedness ripples outward, creating communities of courage and connection. Imagine a circle of friends where no one pretends to be perfect, where mistakes are met with laughter and support, where gratitude is spoken freely. Imagine workplaces where vulnerability is valued, families where love is not earned but assured. This is the world wholehearted living makes possible. To live wholeheartedly is to embrace the paradox of being human. We are imperfect and worthy, fragile and strong, fearful and courageous. It is to wake each day with the intention to show up, to risk, to connect. It is to say, I will not wait until I am perfect to live. I will live now, imperfect and wholehearted. Empathy is the bridge between shame and belonging. Brené Brown calls it the antidote to shame because it dissolves the isolation that shame thrives on. Where shame whispers, "You are alone," empathy answers, "You are not." And in that simple exchange, healing begins. Empathy is not about fixing or advising. It is not about saying, "Look on the bright side." True empathy is presence, entering another's story without judgment, without rushing to solve, simply saying, "I hear you, I feel with you, I'm here." It requires us to be vulnerable ourselves, because stepping into another's pain can stir our own. But it is that shared humanity that makes empathy powerful. Brown highlights the difference between sympathy and empathy. Sympathy says, "That looks bad. I feel sorry for you," while standing at a distance. Empathy climbs down into the hole with you and says, "I know this place. You're not alone." Shame cannot survive being spoken and met with empathy. The very act of being seen, heard, and understood loosens its grip. Think about a time when you confessed something painful to someone, and they didn't try to fix it or dismiss it, but simply said, "I get it. That sounds hard." In that moment, you felt lighter, not because the problem vanished, but because you were no longer carrying it alone. That is the power of empathy. Empathy also creates belonging. Belonging is not fitting in. Fitting in requires you to change yourself to be accepted. Belonging allows you to be yourself and still be embraced. Empathy fosters this by saying, "You don't have to be perfect here. You can be you, and I will stay." Without empathy, relationships remain shallow. With it, they deepen into true connection. Brown warns that empathy takes courage. It asks us to set aside our own discomfort and truly listen. It asks us not to retreat into platitudes. "At least you still have," or "It could be worse." These phrases minimize pain. Empathy validates it, and that validation is often what people need most. She also explains that empathy must be practiced inward as well as outward. Self-empathy is acknowledging our own feelings without judgment, giving ourselves the same compassion we'd give a friend. Without self-empathy, offering empathy to others becomes hollow, because we cannot give what we refuse to accept ourselves. In workplaces, empathy transforms culture. A manager who responds to mistakes with curiosity instead of shame builds trust. A colleague who listens instead of dismisses strengthens the team. In families, empathy turns conflict into connection. A parent saying, "I know you're frustrated. I felt that too," creates understanding where blame would have built walls. Brown emphasizes that empathy does not require identical experiences. You don't need to have lived the same story to connect. What it requires is tapping into the part of yourself that knows fear, loss, joy, or uncertainty. It is saying, "I may not know exactly what you're going through, but I understand the feeling, and I will stand with you." Empathy is also how we counter the culture of disconnection. In a world driven by competition, perfection, and scarcity, empathy is a radical act. It slows us down. It asks us to listen. It reminds us that beneath all the armor, we are all human, all fragile, all longing to belong. Imagine a community where empathy is the norm, where neighbors check on each other, Colleagues support instead of compete. Families listen instead of judge. It would not eliminate pain, but it would transform it. Pain shared becomes lighter. Joy shared becomes greater. Connection becomes the thread that holds us all together. To dare greatly is not only to show up vulnerably, but also to meet others when they do the same. It is to answer courage with compassion, fear with understanding, shame with empathy. In doing so, we create the kind of world where belonging is possible and where no one has to stand alone. To dare greatly is to choose courage over comfort, again and again. Brené Brown closes her work with a call to action. Stop waiting for certainty, stop chasing perfection, and step into your life as it is, with your whole heart. Daring greatly is not about winning every battle or proving yourself flawless. It is about showing up, in love, in work, in parenting, in friendship, even when there are no guarantees. The world will always have critics. They will sit in the stands, pointing out your flaws, mocking your failures, questioning your worth. But Brown reminds us of Roosevelt's wisdom. The critic does not count. The credit belongs to the one in the arena, marred by dust and sweat, striving, failing, rising. If you wait for the critics to disappear, you will never begin. The only way forward is to accept that criticism is part of the price of courage. Daring greatly also means redefining success. In a culture that measures worth by achievement, status, or wealth, it is radical to say, success is showing up authentically. Success is raising your hand with an idea, even if it might flop. Success is saying, I love you first. Success is admitting, I don't know, but I'm willing to learn. Each of these acts may look small, but together they shape a life of bravery. Brown insists that vulnerability is not a one-time leap. It is a practice. Each day offers arenas: the meeting, the conversation, the creative project, the apology, the risk of joy. Each day asks, will you armor up or will you show up? The choice is rarely easy, but over time, it defines who we become. Wholehearted living, shame resilience, empathy, gratitude. All of these threads weave together into the fabric of daring greatly. It is not about removing fear, but about walking with it. Not about eliminating uncertainty, but about trusting ourselves in its midst. Not about perfection, but about presence. Imagine looking back at your life from its end. Will you remember the times you played it safe, never risking failure? Or will you remember the times you stepped into the arena, trembling, imperfect, but alive? The times you dared to love, to create, to lead, to speak, to live fully. That is the legacy of daring greatly. Brown leaves us with a simple but profound truth. Vulnerability is the birthplace of everything we long for. Love, joy, belonging, creativity, trust, empathy, innovation, all of them require risk. All of them require exposure. To protect ourselves from vulnerability is to protect ourselves from life itself. So the invitation stands. Dare to enter the arena. Dare to take off the armor. Dare to live with an open heart. You will stumble. You will fail. You will feel the sting of shame. But you will also taste connection, meaning, and joy that cannot be found any other way. To dare greatly is to live fully human. To say, I am imperfect, I am vulnerable, and I am enough. And I am enough. And I am enough. And I am enough.